Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and I wasn't really sure what book I wanted to make a video about this week, and then I realized it's been roughly 20 weeks since I talked about Pitt number 1, so I figured, why not talk about Pitt number 2? Let's zoom in and take a closer look. Now, some of you watching may be thinking to yourselves, Bo, 20 weeks seems like a long time to go between issues, and you're correct, it is. Coincidentally, it's roughly the exact same amount of time that it took Dale Keown to publish Pitt number 2 after publishing Pitt number 1. Pitt number 1 came out in January of 1993, whereas Pitt number 2 came out in July of 1993. Pencils and plot, Dale Keown. Script, Brian Houghton. Inks, Joe Rubinstein, Scott Williams. Colors, Joe Chiodo. Letters and logo, Chance Wolfe. Color separator, Ollie Optics. Editor, Sasha Lemelin, I believe. Sorry if I'm getting that wrong. We see here on the very first page that there is a bank robbery in progress. However, this is not happening in real time. Instead, this is actually the recounting of a bank robbery by one of the employees at the bank, which, to those of you who saw my video on Pitt number 1, case in point, if you haven't watched that video, I suggest that you do, unless you just enjoy being really confused about the story at hand, is an odd place to pick up. We left off in a situation where there were alien bounty hunters and a standoff with the police in a subway in Times Square, and that's not at all where we're picking up in issue number 2. We see here on the next page, the bank robbers are just being general douchebags to all the employees in the bank. Of course, they would be, they're robbers. Forcing their way to the vault, getting all the money, hitting some of the employees on the way out. As they're running out of the building, one of them decides to take off his mask, which is a really stupid idea considering they made a point to all be dressed identically to make it harder to identify who each individually they were. As they're running through the street, one of the employees who was late to work happens to be right outside the bank about to walk in, and she sees them and realizes what was happening. And they see her and realize that she's seen one of their faces, as we see this guy in the back is really angry about that guy who just took his mask off. So they decide to grab the employee of the bank and take her hostage. The driver of the van is not happy about this, but is told to just shut up and drive. They're then in an argument with one another because they don't want to have to deal with a hostage, but the guy who grabbed the employee basically states that they're going to kill her anyway when they get to their hideout. And that probably could have worked for them if it weren't for the fact that someone else, namely Pitt, saw what just happened, and he's not too pleased about it. Here we see on the next page that Pitt is slowly letting go of the handlebars of the motorcycle that he took from the gang of motorcycle street toughs who he beat up / killed in issue number 1. As he's getting closer to the van, they hear a sound, and then they see Pitt smash through the back of the van and ripping both of the doors completely off the backside. They, of course, freak out that there's a giant monster alien guy on the back of the van and decide to open fire, hitting him point blank in the forehead, which unfortunately for them does absolutely nothing because, as we've seen in past issues, gunshots don't really have much of an effect on Pitt, and he heals really quickly. In fact, he almost seems like he enjoyed being shot in the forehead. On the next page, we get a cool action sequence as Pitt quickly reaches in to neutralize the threat of the gunman, smashing the gun along with his hand, which he's quite upset about as he screams, "My hand." Pitt then reaches in, grabs the hostage, pulls her to safety as the gunman is now writhing in pain from having his hand completely crushed and destroyed. Pitt then jumps off the back of the van, getting the hostage to safety, as the thug who had his hand crushed is screaming that they need to get him to a hospital. They zoom away quickly. The bank teller seems to be a little perturbed by the fact that Pitt is letting them get away with all of the money they stole, Pitt doesn't really seem to care, as money doesn't seem to have much of a meaning to him, and then leaps away like the Incredible Hulk, because, I mean, let's face it, Pitt is based pretty heavily on the Incredible Hulk. And then we're transported to the very near future as we see this has been her retelling of what happened to her to the police as they're responding to the bank robbery. The police officer then decides that he's going to take her down to the station so that they can get more questioning and try to get police sketches of the perpetrators of the bank robbery. And then we overhear on the radio the, I guess, all points bulletin about the goings on in the train station that happened at the end of issue number 1, where the bounty hunters were having a standoff with the police. However, I should point out that this is a bit of a continuity error, as in issue number 1, that was happening at night, whereas here we can see that's clearly happening in broad daylight. We then see the bounty hunters leap through the hole that they just blasted through the city streets from the train station in hot pursuit of what they believe to be their intended target. Back in the train station, we see that there is pure chaos. There's rubble, there's fires, there's all sorts of collapsed structure. Harris here is, as we remember her from the first issue, a detective for the NYPD. She's groggy, trying to regain her composure after the explosion. Then she realizes that she doesn't know where her partner Jack is. Unfortunately for Jack, he is pinned underneath this large concrete support beam. And he is wondering who any of those guys were. Harris, of course, tells him that she has no idea, but then proceeds to pick up the giant concrete support beam right off of his legs, which he's astounded by because it should weigh a couple of tons at least. She tries to play it off as if it's just something that is caused by a huge surge of adrenaline from all of the stress that they've encountered, and that such things can give regular people what appears to be superhuman strength. He, of course, doesn't buy it and states that that was super weird that she was able to do it, which it was. And we will probably find out exactly what that was all about at some point, but it's not going to be in this issue because this is the only 2 pages that these characters are featured on in this entire book. Here on the next page, we see that Pitt is climbing up the side of a building with his bare hands because of his incredible strength. And we see that he is having a conversation with a chakran child, who, if you remember from the first issue, was one of the aliens that was present when the Creed, I guess, hit squad teleported into their base or lair and started killing everybody. And that child was then able to, essentially, from what I'm gathering, able to merge its consciousness with that of Pitt's. So they essentially now both share the same body. However, this child can simply sense all of Pitt's bodily functions, sight, feeling, senses, and also communicate directly with him, but it doesn't seem like it can control his body for the most part, or at least it doesn't in this issue. It then informs Pitt that the bounty hunters are looking for him. However, his biological signal is a mix between Creed and human. And that is also the biological signal that is put out by Timmy, who is also a mix of Creed and human. And that the bounty hunters don't realize this because Pitt's biological signal is being masked by the chakran child. Therefore, they're going after Timmy right now, thinking that it's Pitt. Pitt realizes that he's got to protect Timmy and his grandfather, and quickly leaps into action, even though he's afraid it might be too late. We're then teleported to Connecticut in the setting of the home of Timmy's grandfather. We see Timmy here watching TV as his program is interrupted by a special news report by the same news anchor that we often see in Spawn comics. However, Dale Keown was smart enough to not use the official CNN corporate logo in his comic books. Timmy is engrossed by watching the report of the huge explosion of the superpowered beings in the subway that happened in Times Square. Timmy was also a super cool kid because he had a Stimpy Rude Toot plush toy. Those things were awesome back in 1993. As he continues to watch television, there's a sudden explosion as the bounty hunters have found him and just blasted through the wall of their home. They quickly take aim and miss as Timmy runs for his grandfather, who comes to his aid with the baseball bat. Unfortunately, he's facing off against giant rock monster aliens, who he is not prepared to fight, and they quickly grab him to subdue him. And thankfully for Timmy's grandfather, Pitt was right on point with his timing and is here to save the day. Here we get this really cool 2-page image of Pitt jumping into action as he takes aim and slashes at one of the rock monsters, who apparently are not solid rock. They just have rock skin that Pitt is easily able to break through, and we see a huge spattering of, I guess, green blood that they have. He then slashes him again here in this lower panel. He's making really quick work of these giant beefy rock dudes. Unfortunately for Pitt, there was more than one rock monster bounty hunter who attacks him from behind. However, this just sends Pitt into full berserker rage mode as he quickly turns around, kicks him in the gut, then punches him, then jumps on him after he hits the ground and just starts pummeling his face as he taunts him, saying, "You were sent here to kill me, so what are you waiting for? Kill me," which is such a badass way to taunt someone that you're ripping apart. Unfortunately, Pitt has one more adversary to deal with who has him in his sights and shoots him from behind. Then we see this guy with the big giant laser cannon and the weird asymmetrical cyber claw arm. And he's telling Pitt that he's going to kill him, but Pitt is not intimidated at all and says, "Go ahead, complete your mission." After seeing his comrades go toe-to-toe with Pitt and what happened to them, this guy had the bright idea of just opening fire with his laser cannon weapon and begins to unleash on Pitt, shooting him multiple times over and over again, breaking his chains, which is probably a good thing because Pitt seems to enjoy wearing 300 pounds worth of chains for no reason other than it looks awesome. And then grabs him here with his claw arm, shooting him point blank in the face, but then realizing that everything he just did really didn't hurt Pitt all that much, as we can see that even though Pitt has half of his face blown off, he is still not even fazed by any of the attacks that this guy just threw at him. Here on the next page, we get another cool action sequence where Pitt grabs that bounty hunter's huge cyber arm, crushing it, then reaching over with his other hand and punching his head clean off of his body, which is such an awesome way to kill somebody. That's terrific. I really got to hand it to Dale Keown. He knew what he was doing when he was drawing action sequences. Here on the next page, after the danger is gone, we see Timmy approaching Pitt, completely not intimidated by him at all, as he remembers him as the one who was defending him in the subway where they first met, which happened in Youngblood number 4. I'll have to get to Youngblood number 4 at some point so that we can have a video of that sequence, which was, I think, Pitt's first appearance overall. Timmy thinks it's actually pretty awesome that Pitt was able to help them, and then asks why those bounty hunters were after him and his grandpa in the first place. And Pitt tells him that it was basically just a misunderstanding and that they were after him. And then Timmy gets to meet the Chakran child, technically, as he speaks to Timmy through telepathy. The child then explains how he's co-inhabiting Pitt's body. Once again, speaking volumes to how tough Pitt is. Even though he has all of the skin blown off of one half of his face, he doesn't seem to really be fazed by it whatsoever. Timmy's grandpa then, who is now unharmed as well, comes to Timmy, and then Pitt apologizes for all the chaos that has been caused and the destruction to their home. His grandfather then says, it's no big deal, it's insured, which is probably true, but I'd love to meet the insurance company that will cover alien bounty hunters blasting an entire wall out of one side of your home. After that, we see that we are teleported to outer space, where we see this Creed spaceship, where one of the commanding officers from the assault that was led on Chakra is reporting to, I believe, the leader of the Creed. It's not fully explained in this issue about the fact that their mission was a failure and that the Chakran child was able to meld its consciousness with that of Pitt. And we see here that his superior is not happy about this at all. But he then says, are you tracking him? He then claims that they've sent bounty hunters and that they're going to take care of everything. But he's then quickly informed that Pitt's DNA was taken directly from this huge monster creature, and that Pitt is undeniably a living weapon who is unstoppable and cannot be caught by mere bounty hunters, and that this failure is going to be unacceptable in terms of what the mission for the Creed is. We see here on the last page of the story a large, ghastly hand reach out, grab this guy by the face, holding him tightly, and he says that he's going to kill him slowly so that he can feed on his fear. And then the last thing he says is, "Feed me," which I guess maybe he gains energy by feeding on fear. Perhaps it's kind of a Freddy Krueger type of thing. I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to get further into the story because it's been a long time since I've read these books. And then on the next page, we see the letter section, which is now called Letter Rip, which admittedly is a clever title for the letter section. It's basically just people writing in, talking about how they were happy with the first issue of Pitt and how they enjoyed it and couldn't wait to see the next issue. Unfortunately, they're going to have to wait quite some time to see the next issue because of the 5-month delay between issues. And then we also get this little drawing, apparently, that somebody sent in, some kid. It's cool. Next, we get a 2-page ad for Codename Strikeforce, which was an offshoot comic from Cyberforce, starring none other than Stryker as the leader of the team. We also get new characters, Bloodbow, Tempest, Black Anvil, and Mark Silvestri's greatest creation of his entire career. That's right, I'm talking about Killraiser. He's amazing. I can't wait to get into Strikeforce at some point. I have some issues of it, just so that we can talk about the greatness of Killraiser. Here on the very last page of the book, we see an advertisement for Gen 10, not Gen 13. I guess this is a precursor to Gen 13. I don't have any actual issues of Gen 13. It was never a book that really interested me. But I suppose for the sake of doing these videos, I should probably try and find some issues of Gen 13 and pick them up at some point or another. But this is Gen 10, which, again, I'm guessing is somewhat of a prequel to it, but I would have to read it to find out. And then on the reverse inside cover, we have an advertisement for Extreme, which is a 64-page quarterly that features the talents of a lot of different artists. And it was supposed to be on sale in August of 1993. I don't know how many issues of Extreme got published, or if this one even got published. I know for a fact I've never come across one of these or seen one in back issues anywhere. But if I ever do, I wouldn't hesitate to pick it up just to see what it was all about. And that was Pitt #2, which overall, pretty fun book. Not a whole lot to complain about here. Dale Keown's artwork is spot on, as you would always expect from him. You get a lot of really cool action sequences. The book does a really good job of progressing the story. We get a look into a little more of the creed and a little bit more of an understanding about their motivations. We do see that there's, inklings towards the fact that Harris has her own superpowers that we didn't know about before. We get a little more information about Pitt and Timmy being hybrids between the Creed and humans. And it was a really fun book, but it also very well illustrates the pitfalls, no pun intended there, of creator-owned independent comic books. And that's the fact that very frequently they fail to miss deadlines. And that was super common in the early days of Image amongst the guys who founded Image Comics, in that they were missing deadlines left and right. And it's one thing when it's a month, but in the case of Pitt, you're talking 5 solid months between issue #1 and issue #2, which is really hard to keep people's interest when you've got 5 months of downtime. So you lost all of the steam that you had going to issue #2 because people forget and move on. So some of the readers you possibly could have gotten to purchase a second issue maybe didn't, because they just had lost track, or were maybe understandably a little irritated by the fact that it took so long for issue #2 to come out. But as I stated, I enjoy this book, and if you buy it now, you can buy the whole series just in a bundle if you're in the right place at the right time, and you could just read through the whole thing without having to wait on anyone. So if you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I really do appreciate the uptick in views that I've seen in the past few weeks. And, at any rate, I just appreciate everyone watching. Thanks for stopping by, and have a great day.